11:42 a.m., September 1st, 2025, Kherson Oblast. The late summer sun beat down on the dusty outskirts of Kherson, baking the cracked earth and peeling plaster of a two-story building that had long surrendered to decay. To any passerby, it was a ghost, another scar left by a relentless war. But behind its sagging roof and shattered windows, a sophisticated heart was beating. This was a critical nerve center for the Russian war machine on the western bank of the Dnipro River, a covert command post from which death was exported daily. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of electronics and the stale scent of sweat and cigarettes. Maps littered tables, and screens glowed with the cold green light of drone feeds. From this unassuming shell, Russian officers could orchestrate hell. Each week, they directed over 40 Shahed drones on their long, buzzing flights toward Kyiv's sleeping skyline. From here, they unleashed swarms of Lancet loitering munitions, the bane of Ukrainian artillery crews in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. To its occupants, the post was a masterpiece of camouflage, a dagger hidden in plain sight, nestled within a residential block, utterly invisible. Their confidence was their undoing. They were not invisible. For 72 agonizingly patient hours, they had been watched. High above, circling in the indifferent blue sky, a Ukrainian Lancets 100 UAV had been their silent shadow. It was a ghost in the sky, its optics missing nothing. Every radio emission, every vehicle arrival, every soldier carrying a crate was logged, analyzed, and transmitted to a hardened command bunker in Mykolaiv. The building's entire layout, down to the placement of the main command console, was a known quantity. And as a new shift of Russian officers stepped through the door that morning, they unknowingly walked into their own tomb. The countdown had already begun.
11:55 a.m., Dolgincevo Forward Air Base. On the sun-bleached tarmac, a Ukrainian MiG-29S Fulcrum stood poised, a predator straining at its leash. Its weathered gray paint told stories of countless sorties, but today it was armed for a mission of singular precision. Beneath its wings, two GBU-39 small-diameter bombs were locked into place. Each was a 250-pound needle designed to thread its way through the enemy's defenses. The fuses were set for instantaneous detonation. This was a surgical strike, not a demolition. In the cockpit, Captain Mikita Falcon Volkov went through his final checks, his movements economical and precise. His gloved fingers danced over the switches, his breath a steady rhythm in his oxygen mask. This was not a brawl. There would be no swirling dogfight. This was a scalpel strike, a high-speed, low-altitude infiltration deep into one of the most heavily defended airspaces on the front. A single mistake, a moment's hesitation, and he would be a smear of burning wreckage on the steppe. His support was minimal, a testament to the audacity of the plan. No fighter escort to draw fire. His only companions were the ever-watchful Lancets 100 and a swarm of Punisher mini-UAVs tasked with acting as decoys, a flock of ghosts to distract the Russian bear. On his outer pylons, two R-73 air-to-air missiles provided a slim hope of survival should a Russian fighter get lucky. Beneath the fuselage, an SPS-141 jamming pod was his shield in the ethereal world of electronic warfare. The GPS over INS navigation suite was already alive, the target coordinates a glowing green cross on his display, triple-checked against the live video feed from the Lancets. The margin for error was less than a meter.
11:58 p.m. With a final clearance from the tower, Mikita pushed the throttles forward. The two Klimov RD-33 engines howled to life, their roar carrying through the air. The Fulcrum surged forward, a gray arrow launched from a bow, lifting off the runway and into the sky. The moment he was airborne, Mikita shoved the stick forward, forcing the jet down until the radar altimeter screamed. 165 feet. The ground became a terrifying, high-speed blur of green and brown. This was Nap of the Earth flying. A violent ballet danced on the razor's edge between the Earth and the sky. At this altitude, he was beneath the lobes of even the most powerful long-range radars, their beams passing harmlessly over his head, blinded by the curvature of the Earth itself. His HUD was a cascade of flickering numbers. Speed, 480 knots. Altitude, holding steady at a heart-stopping 165 feet. A countdown timer glowed ominously. Time to release T0087.
12:06 p.m., the pieces were in motion. In the Ukrainian command bunker, the main screen split. On the left, the crystal-clear top-down view from the Laleka 100 showing the target building. A slight breeze ruffled a Yagi antenna in the yard. Two Russian soldiers, oblivious, carried a heavy crate inside. On the right, a tactical map showed a single fast-moving blue icon, Makita's MiG-29, streaking across the contested landscape. 12:08:45 p.m., 37 miles to go. Suddenly, the cockpit erupted in a symphony of alarms. A shrill, insistent tone pierced Makita's concentration. The screen of his SPO-15 Borisa radar warning receiver lit up, a threat vector arrow pointing northeast. Potlit K-1 acquisition radar. He'd been painted. Instinct and training took over. Makita rolled the fighter hard, banking until he was flying perpendicular to the incoming radar beam, a beam maneuver. This distorted his Doppler velocity signature, confusing the enemy system and buying him precious seconds. Simultaneously, he activated the SPS-141. The jamming pod began screaming broadband interference, a torrent of electronic noise designed to blind the Russian radar, turning his fighter's precise return into a smeared, unintelligible blur. From the southwest, the decoy package sprang to life. The Punisher UAVs began pulsing erratic signals, their tiny radar cross-sections blooming into a confusing constellation of false targets. Others climbed steeply, deliberately creating contrails to draw the eyes and sensors of the Russian air defense crews. The Borisa screamed, a relentless pulse of digital terror, but then the tone shifted, rising to a solid high-pitched scream. It was the sound every pilot dreaded, lock-on. A fire control radar from a Panzer S-1 battery near Kherson had him. A missile launch was imminent. A trail of white smoke ripped upward from the ground. Missile away. Makita had less than 5 seconds. He pulled the stick back gently, bleeding speed to 450 knots to tighten his turn, while his thumb hammered the flare dispenser button. A brilliant chain of magnesium flares erupted behind the MiG, each burning hotter than his engine exhaust. At the same time, he deployed an AL-50 toy decoy, a small device unspooling on a long cable, designed to present a much more tempting target. The Panzer missile, hunting for his heat signature, was fatally seduced. Its secret locked onto the massive infrared bloom of the flares and swerved violently, detonating 1,000 feet away in a harmless puff of gray smoke. In the cockpit, the Borisa scream dropped back to a lower priority search tone. He had survived the first attempt, but he was now deep in the lion's den.
12:09:40 p.m., 17 miles to go. The moment of maximum vulnerability had arrived. Time to climb, Makita muttered, his voice tight. He hauled back hard on the stick. The G-forces crushed him into his seat as the MiG-29 pitched up at a breathtaking 40-degree angle, rocketing from the relative safety of the deck to an exposed altitude of 6,500 feet in mere seconds. The pop-up was a calculated risk. It made him a glaring target, but it was essential. The height and speed would give the GBU-39s the energy they needed to glide to their target with lethal precision. On his HUD, red letters flashed, release point in range. The mission computer had a solid lock. Makita's hands were a blur on the weapons panel. Mode, precise coordinate, fuse, instant, release, sequential. The estimated error margin now read plus or minus 2 feet. Perfect. He took one deep, steadying breath, held it, and pressed the release button. Clunk, clunk. Two distinct vibrations ran through the airframe as the bombs separated cleanly from their pylons. As they fell away, their diamond-shaped wings snapped open, transforming them from simple bombs into intelligent aerodynamic gliders. Makita didn't wait to watch. He rolled the fulcrum inverted and pulled through, diving back towards the sanctuary of the low altitude, throttles pushed to the firewall. His part was done. Now it was up to the weapons. 12:10:12 p.m. The two GBU-39s soared through the air at nearly Mach 0.9, silent and unseen. They were not falling, they were flying. Their internal guidance systems, preloaded with the Laleka's real-time data, made constant, minute adjustments, trimming their wings against the wind, holding a perfect course, even through potential GPS jamming. In the command bunker, everyone held their breath, their eyes glued to the Laleka's feed. The UAV's camera zoomed in, the two-story house filling the entire screen. The bombs were now less than a mile out, diving at a steep 40-degree angle. 12:10:22 p.m. The first bomb entered the frame, a fleeting, dark shape against the blue sky. Inside the building, a Russian officer likely looked up from his screen, perhaps annoyed by a sudden faint whistling sound. He would have had no time to understand. 12:10:24 p.m. The screen went white. A blinding flash erupted as the first GBU-39 punched through the building's western wall and detonated. An instant later, the second bomb struck the roof. The structure didn't just collapse, it vaporized. A thunderous roar, delayed by distance, shook the Laleka's airframe as a column of fire, concrete, and smoke erupted hundreds of feet into the sky. The shockwave radiated outwards, shattering the windows of neighboring buildings. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left. The building was gone, replaced by a deep, smoldering crater. Twisted metal, shattered electronics, and the remnants of the Russian command team were strewn across the landscape. 20 personnel, controllers, technicians, and intelligence officers were annihilated in a fraction of a second. 12:12 p.m. The Laleka banked slowly over the scene of utter devastation, its camera transmitting the irrefutable proof. A calm voice came over the comms in the command bunker. Hit confirmed. Target destroyed. Falcon is heading home. The ripple effects were instantaneous. 3 separate Shahed drone strikes were canceled mid-flight. A Russian artillery battery, suddenly blind without its drone spotters, was located and obliterated by a HIMARS volley. Special forces raids were aborted. Convoys ground to a halt, terrified to move without eyes in the sky. 12:20 p.m. Makita's MiG-29 touched down, its engines winding down as it taxied to a halt. The entire mission, from takeoff to landing, had lasted 21 minutes. In the aftermath, panic directives flew from Russian headquarters. Control posts must move every 30 minutes. Crews must be split up. But the damage was done. It wasn't just the loss of a command post, it was the birth of a fear. Every decrepit building, every abandoned farmhouse was now a potential tomb. They were no longer the hunters, but the hunted. The Kherson airstrike was not a grand battle. It was a single sortie, a whisper in a storm of war. But it demonstrated the terrifying new calculus of the modern battlefield. Sometimes, the most decisive blow is not a sledgehammer, but a perfectly aimed scalpel delivered from the sky.